The city's latest daily tally of new COVID infections again fell to below 8,000. 23 more people have succumbed to the coronavirus. Health officials say they will continue to monitor the situation to see if the daily caseload has peaked. Caleb Leung has details.
Among the 7,322 new COVID-19 infections reported today, 7,190 were locally transmitted cases. In view of the recent trend of the epidemic development, the Center for Health Protection believes the situation has stabilized.
We expect some fluctuations from day to day. We'll closely monitor the situation to confirm whether the caseload has peaked and we may be in a plateau situation and hopefully reduction in caseload.
With the epidemic now stabilized, the government is actively considering whether to further relax its quarantine requirements for inbound travelers.
The government's direction is to enhance alignment with the international community as far as possible. The 3+4 quarantine arrangement has given us data for review, and we are proactively considering quarantine arrangements and the proposed 0.7 suggestion.
The hospital authority reported that 23 more COVID patients aged between 58 and 94 died. Among them, 17 were not fully vaccinated with 3 COVID jabs. The new deaths have brought the city's total number of fatalities in the 5th wave of infections so far to 9,678. 6 more care home residents from 5 institutions tested positive for COVID. 69 other care home residents were listed as close contacts and sent to quarantine. 3 schools reported new COVID cases and had to suspend classes for a week. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
As the daily COVID infections may have plateaued, some are optimistic about the gradual decline in cases this coming winter. But Government Health Advisor David Hui believes that even if infections continue to show a downward trend, case numbers will remain hovering around the 4-figure level. Timothy Lee spoke with Hui on the government's plan of possibly scrapping hotel quarantine measures and the need for pre-flight PCR tests depending on the pandemic situation in the next 2 weeks.
Over the last week, daily COVID infection numbers in Hong Kong have gradually dropped from over 10,000 to around 8,000. Speaking with TVB, Government Health Advisor David Hui estimates that even if the daily caseload continues to decline, it is unlikely to drop to the triple-digit level.
In recent days, I think the number of cases actually is around 8,000, and the trend is actually coming down. And this is reflected by the real-time reproduction number, which is now below 1. So I think the number of cases will continue to come down. Take the example of Singapore. Right? At the peak in the recent wave, Singapore actually encountered 16,000 to 17,000 cases per day. But even yesterday, it was 2,400. Okay? So I think Hong Kong probably will have a similar trend.
The government has recently said it is considering changing the mandatory quarantine period for inbound travelers at the airport to just 7 days of medical surveillance and abandon the hotel quarantine measure. But the government advisor believes more restrictions can be relaxed, including the scrapping of pre-flight PCR tests, as imported infections make up less than 2% of all cases.
Our healthcare system can sustain, then I see no reason why we should not actually lower the threshold for the overseas returnees. I think the 0+7 is one of the breakthrough if we can go ahead. And the 7 days can even be considered to be shortened if it doesn't constitute any further risk to Hong Kong.
Just a few days ago, the World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said that the pandemic's the end is near in sight. Do you think that's true? Do you agree with that?
So the trend is that the situation is actually getting better. But by publishing this sort of information, WHO doesn't mean the virus will disappear. What they mean is by the end of the year, they may remove COVID-19 from the list of public health emergency of international concern.
Hui also suggests adjusting the vaccine pass for senior citizens, such as shortening the interval between the second and third jabs to protect the high-risk age group. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Financial Secretary Paul Chan says Hong Kong is set to record the second worst budget deficit ever. This as the finance chief expects the budget to run a deficit of more than $100 billion, almost double the original estimate of $56.3 billion. That's because of the weak stock and property markets, as well as pressure on businesses. That generated less revenue from stamp duty, salary tax, and land sales. He says the numbers could be worse if not for the $35 billion raised through the issuing of green bonds. The finance chief says the economic situation is expected to remain very challenging over the next few quarters. He thinks improvements will depend on how much the pandemic has been brought under control and if there could be easier cross-border travel. Today is the 91st anniversary of the September 18 incident, a staged bombing by the Japanese military that led to the invasion of the northeastern Chinese region of Manchuria. Memorial ceremonies were held in the city of Shenyang and Liaoning province. A bell-ringing ceremony was held this morning at the square of Shenyang's September 18 Incident History Museum. The bell was rung 18 times to signify the 14 years of resistance against the Japanese invaders, which lasted from 1931 until Japan's surrender in 1945. More than 300 people participated in the solemn event, including veterans. At 9:18 a.m., air sirens blared for 3 minutes, reenacting the same moment the invasion began. Across the city, cars sounded their horns as a respectful gesture. The September 18 incident was the penultimate act of Japanese aggression that led to the Second Sino-Japanese War. And back locally, a number of organizations held protests outside the Consulate General of Japan. Protesters also chanted slogans calling for the return of the Diaoyu Islands to China. One of the most prominent organizations who joined the protest was the Action Committee for Defending the Diaoyu Islands. Members marched from the General Post Office in Central to the building where the Japanese Consulate General is located. The Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions held banners urging the public to not forget the nation's history. The group called on the Japanese government to refrain from historical revisionism in order to prevent a return to its imperialist past. Some other organizations also demanded that Tokyo pay reparations for the September 18th incident. At least 27 people were killed and 20 others injured after a bus turned on its side in Guizhou province early Sunday morning. According to local authorities, the incident happened at around 2 a.m. The bus with 47 people on board was moving on a highway in Sandu Shui Autonomous County when the accident happened. Since 2018, long-distance passenger buses across the mainland have been banned from running between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. The authorities have yet to explain why the bus was in operation on a highway at the time. Overseas, the Russian Defense Ministry says Ukrainian forces have shelled areas close to the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest of its kind in Europe. Meanwhile, a Russian woman was remembered by her friends and comrades in arms in Kiev. Olga Simonova was killed Tuesday after her vehicle hit a landmine. This while she was fighting on Ukraine's side in the war with her native country. The 34-year-old joined the Ukrainian army years ago. She did so after reading about Russia's war in Chechnya and its actions in the Donbas region and Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. Yesterday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said new evidence was found in Izium, proving people buried at the site of the mass grave were tortured. In his nightly address, Zelensky said more than 10 torture chambers were discovered in various cities and towns recaptured from Russian forces in the Kharkiv region. Welcome back to TVB News. In Britain, foreign leaders have started to arrive in London ahead of Queen Elizabeth's state funeral Monday. And the Queen's grandchildren stood in silent vigil beside her coffin as mourners streamed into Westminster Hall to pay their last respects to Britain's longest-serving monarch. Tracy Furness reports.
People were expecting a 16-hour wait Saturday as the queue of mourners filing past Queen Elizabeth's coffin stretched 8 kilometres from Westminster Hall to Southwark Park in South London. King Charles and his eldest son, Prince William, made an unannounced visit to greet the waiting crowd, shaking hands with mourners near Lambeth Bridge. Later in the day, the Queen's 8 grandchildren, headed by Prince William, stood in silent vigil by the Queen's coffin as mourners filed past. Prince Harry, who served in Afghanistan as an army officer, wore his military uniform for the vigil, after wearing civilian clothes earlier in the week. Mourners were moved by the scene.
You could see that they were thinking hard about their grandmother and the Queen, and it was good to see them all together as a set of grandchildren, given the things that have happened over the last few years. So I think that was really good to see the family together.
Also filing past Queen Elizabeth's coffin Saturday was the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his Canadian counterpart Justin Trudeau. King Charles met with the two leaders at Buckingham Palace, as well as with New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, among other state leaders. Meanwhile, more world leaders arrived in the British capital, including US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden, who arrived on Air Force One Saturday. The President is expected to sign the official condolence book and attend a reception at Buckingham Palace Sunday ahead of Monday's state funeral. And Japan's Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako arrived at London's Stansted Airport. It's the Emperor's first overseas trip since ascending the throne in May 2019. Nearly 100 presidents and heads of government will attend Monday's funeral ceremony. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Police have seized some 900 kilograms of cannabis buds, the largest ever haul of the drug on record. 2 men have been arrested in connection with the case. Apart from the cannabis buds, officers also seized a kilogram of methamphetamine in the raid. Altogether, the drugs are worth around $190 million. They are believed to have been shipped to Hong Kong from North America. They were packaged as construction materials before being stored in 3 industrial buildings in Tuen Mun and San Po Kong, where police raided. The force say more than 260 people under the age of 21 have been arrested on drug-related offenses between January and July this year. Half of them involve cannabis.
From a demand side, we see that cannabis has become one of the popular culture, which is wrong, among the youth. And that's explained why in quite a number of entertainment premises and in the youth culture, they have been promoting the use of cannabis.
That is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.